Welcome back. It's day 318 of this Growing an Alphonso mango seedling series, although I'm not quite sure, as you'll see later on, that it's actually a seedling. I swear I saw a dead seed in there when I did my first transplant, but maybe I was mistaken. Maybe it was just a dead seed from another plant at the nursery. So anyway, this is I believe March 2023, and going on into April, we had an unusually wet, rainy season that was very, very prolonged, and you can see all sorts of snails. It's pretty gross. Even after a mild drizzle, they're out and about everywhere because the ground is so wet, so they get flushed out very easily. So first 4 months, or maybe just like 5 or 6 months in a row, due to all the rains going back to the end of 2022, have been snail heaven, and there's been some slugs as well. So this was all filmed on the same day. You can see an ant there. So there weren't enough ants to pose a danger to this snail. I actually never saw the ants swarm any of these snails. I don't know why. I mean, I had plenty of ants in some of my pots, especially the one that I used to grow California poppies, and that one was just full of ants all the time when it was warmer and drier. Well, that was later on in the year, I believe. So yeah, just more snail footage. I easily saw 5 or 6 in the same day, and it's starting to rain again. So yeah, I've been operating this YouTube channel for quite a while, since 2011 December, I believe, and I just started off by throwing on a video. Times are tough. I mean, there's lots and lots of great content on YouTube, and I watch a lot of YouTube, but in terms of running a channel, I don't know, I've heard a lot of people just say they're quitting and whatnot, and I know I haven't put out a lot of videos, but yeah, I do want to keep the channel running, but it's not very economically viable for anyone. It's just just kind of a hobby at this point, just for the sake of continuation. But yeah, you can see this is a few days later. Sun finally came out. There's some new buds growing everywhere. The trunk looks pretty rough, but it's also quite thick. But this thing can never stand on its own. That's what I was saying earlier, that I believe it's actually a cutting. And you can see it's spawning a lot of new growth on the bottom. And looks like there's dust on there, but I think that's actually just like tiny little micro flakes of paint from of the same color that you see in the background on those slates. So yeah, that ran off the roof, and due to the positioning of this pot, when everything dries out in the sun like this, it looks like there's some kind of special dust or dirt on there, but it's actually like tiny little flakes of paint. So yeah, day 350, using some more of this garden safe slug and snail bait. So I'm going to sprinkle that around. Something I should have done more aggressively, but at the same time, when it keeps raining, and that's when they do the best, these pellets dissolve, iron phosphate, and then once they dissolve, then the snails and slugs can't ingest them. So I don't know, maybe if it's just like dissolved in their environment, they can drink some of the dissolved iron phosphate, and that'll work. But I'm not sure it's concentrated enough to do something to them at that point. But yeah, what I was saying earlier about the YouTube channel, yeah, viewership has definitely dropped in 2024, and I heard some other creators complain about just RPMs dropping a lot. So yeah, I mean, this is just for interest only. I'd really like to produce more, but at the same time, it is very, very labor intensive to produce videos. I got a new microphone. That's why the audio sounds a lot more rich in terms of just being more like my natural voice. The one I had before was this like 20-year-old Logitech USB microphone. And I just got a new thing off Amazon yesterday. So it's probably been around like 20 years or something. And the technology has really improved according to what you pay for the microphone. And after all those years of inflation, I mean, this microphone's like practically free to what that Logitech USB one cost back in the day. So you can see there's a lot of new growth. I have these 6 really thin bamboo stakes that I got from Lowe's, and I'm still using that nylon, mostly fluorescent green or teal or whatever, with specks of yellow rope string to tie it to the stakes to try to balance it out. So yeah, if I untie all this stuff, it's just gonna like droop over within maybe a day or two and just fall over, which I can't stand. So I'm pretty sure this is a cutting, just like the other 2 plants that I got. And the ice cream bean, actually, that went on to be the most successful. The fig, the Cadota fig, if you remember, that series is over. Let me see, did I even upload? Well, I guess I didn't upload the finale video yet, but yeah, I mean a boar fruit, but it just went out in all directions and drooped as soon as it goes over the pot, even though the branches were very thick and robust. And this has the weakest structural support, the mango. But the ice cream bean, despite being a little lopsided, which is another characteristic of fruit trees or other plants grown from cuttings, that thing is strong enough to stand on its own. And I've trimmed it on the sides where it just gets too long horizontally, but I kind of let it go in the last few months leading into early 2024. So it's actually way bigger now than what you see in the background. I think what you see in the background back there, there was a lot less growth back then, and that was also trimmed too to fit into that little recessed area, that sheltered, wind-sheltered cove, I guess. So I'm using one of my old tricks, just using a handheld mirror to reflect light to illuminate the inside of this plant past the foliage and get some better footage. This works really well with cameras. So yeah, like it's blindingly obvious and in really great detail to my eyes, but I have to do tricks like this to get it to show up well on the camera. But this thing is quite overgrown. It's just like really dense in the middle, and yeah, it's just lots of this red beautiful growth, which I love. But yeah, a lot of the old leaves are dying off, and not sure if that's just due entirely to old age or just a lot of weathering, pests and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm kind of worried about the root system of this pot because it should be root bound by now, but I'm not entirely confident that it is. But given the size of the shoot system, I would think that it is. So whenever you see me spraying using this backpack sprayer, like I mentioned in recent videos, I'm applying some of that pesticide, that Bayer Bio Advanced 3-in-1, just preemptively, and you'll see why I do that later on in this video, but also why it doesn't necessarily work for that long. So it's day 371, 3 weeks later, so we're just getting a pretty good period of growth here in I believe when the weather was warming up and drying out in the middle of 2023. And the foliage is getting bigger, but yeah, I don't know. It's like I was somewhat satisfied with the progress of this plant, but at the same time, it was like very unsightly because all these old leaves that once looked really big and beautiful, almost being a foot long each, they're fraying at the edges, just dying off, and then they shed and it makes a big mess. So I'm hoping that this new wave of growth will enable the plant to take off to new heights. But this is a very, it's a very care-intensive plant compared to all the others. It just never seems to be doing like perfectly well on its own. The leaves are often warped, as you can see here, for just like really no reason at all. And yeah, this is a plant that is just like, I'm never very fully confident that it's doing that well. You just look away for a few days or a few weeks, and all of a sudden the situation can be turned around very rapidly. And I do suspect that the root development isn't as great as some of the other plants that I have that are doing much better. So by day 392, I think that's about another 3 weeks. You could see the color is, the red color is gone, the reds, the browns. It looks more boring now. You can see a little bit of the yellow kick in. This was when the weather was warm. I do believe when the weather is cold, you'll get a lot more days of that yellow transition phase in between, which is really pretty. So yeah, this thing is getting insanely crowded in the middle, and hope that this plant can cope with that. But I'm really worried about the pot size just being too small for cutting of this size. So I'm looking to transplant at some point. And that just looks ugly, the deformed leaf. But it's just born like that. And yeah, this other leaf, some of these other leaves, it's just like nothing chewed on it. It just, the leaves were born like that. So and the stem itself, it's a nice dark green, but it's kind of bumpy, as you just saw. So yeah, regarding the future of this channel, I don't know, I was thinking, a return to just quicker content production would perhaps get people to come back to the channel, watch more stuff more frequently. These long form videos, the problem is a lot of times, unlike many other channels, I just can't have regular content because it depends on what the plants do and how they grow. And I've had kind of a lull. So, oh yeah, I can see the Cadota fig in the background. It's doing pretty well back then. Bore more figs. And you can see some California poppies, stuff like that. So yeah, this is day 400. The leaves have mostly matured. Everything's approaching a dark green again. And there wasn't as much leaf mass as I expected, but yeah, I never really knew if I was watering too much or too little, because it looked like the soil, the coco coir, would dry out very quickly, and it's such a small mass. And given the leaves are so big, I was always worried about that. But yeah, this is day 434. So I got a little lazy at this point and started just sprinkling small amounts of undissolved Miracle-Gro crystals on the top, and then I would just shower with that hose wand that I was just showing off. So you see there's like a lot of cobwebs. The spiders are often nowhere to be seen, and they're certainly not helping out with all the aphids that you see here. So these are pretty big. It's pretty disturbing. It's not that apparent that they're causing like immediate or grave harm, but it's just alarming because they're so big and there's so many of them. So I was thinking about this. I'm like, it's kind of interesting, but you can blow them off or use water to wash them off, but I don't know how easily they can find their way back to the plant. It's not something I've had enough experience with to really say with confidence, but this is the first time I think I've had an aphid infestation like this. And yeah, this is it's definitely a problem that I had to get rid of, but I wasn't very diligent about taking care of my plants around this time period. And yeah, I think people are more interested in seeing me grow stuff from seeds. And the Joshua Tree series has definitely gotten a lot of interest over the years because it's more unique, I imagine, for these other fruit trees. There are many other YouTube creators that grow these sorts of things. So there's probably a lot of content out there. And yeah, so there's just not enough viewership and to go around in this attention-based economy of social media these days. So yeah, you can see lots of aphids, bugs, pests, webs. Not sure if any of them are ever from spider mites, but I hardly ever see the actual spiders. So don't really know what's going on there. They just like spin sometimes just like singular strands, and then they just leave, and I never see them. But yeah, there's still this big aphid problem. We have some new growth, which is nice. So up until this point, the plant was doing pretty well. The lemon in the background, that was kind of suffering from caterpillars again. So, just a few days later, like 4 days later, I decided to see if I could use the hose wand to wash off all of these pests. So, yeah, I'll just give it a try. It seems to have worked really well upon inspection immediately after, but I'm not too sure if they'll come back. But I did this like maybe once or just twice, and then I never saw them again. So it's hard to say what really happened for sure. But day 546, this is much later. You can see there's growths coming out sideways. None of this stuff can stand up on its own, these offshoots on the bottom. So that's really disappointing. I think I'm going to have to trim these off and do a transplant and see if I can just get the plant to be less unruly. And you can see even though the trunk at the bottom is woody with bark, it's not very thick, nor do I think any of that trunk is very strong. So you see the trunk appearance has changed. For whatever reason, the top died. I take the webbings more as being emblematic of problems in general. If there's spiders or spider mites, it means you've got tons of other problems. So people often like to say, well, webbings mean there are spiders, and that's perfectly healthy and fine, and they get rid of pests, but they'll always just eat a fraction of the parasite population that's bugging your plants. So they'll never solve the problem. And so yeah, if you see a lot of spider webs, you can see something kind of dangling off one of the leaves there. It's probably just something trapped in silk. But yeah, this looks really ugly now. And I was just kind of wondering what happened. We didn't really have any rain. It was very, very occasional, nothing enough to cause root rot. And yeah, so at a certain point I just got tired of looking at this ugly eyesore and decided it was time to get moving, start trimming stuff, take out the stakes, do a full transplant, the whole 9 yards. So I was just examining that to see what had gone wrong. You can see the green, dark green, juicy stem had gone to looking like it had leprosy or something. It's just like all wrinkled and rough looking. It wasn't very natural, like bark appearance either. So maybe the problem was disease. I don't know if that was caused by the aphids or some other kind of pest. I don't monitor these plants as closely as I used to. Like, let's say a decade ago, I'd just like look at every single thing, and had a point and shoot camera. I would zoom in and examine everything in the most macro detail ever. But yeah, this is just outside. It's on ground level. There's like lots of pests. So you see that's real ugly. It's really disgusting looking. It's probably full of webs and dead parasites. I'm going to chuck that. And hopefully this trimming will get things to take off again. Although at this point I wasn't very optimistic. I just kind of intuitively knew that this plant was perhaps on the decline for reasons not fully understood. So Yeah, there's a lot of dead leaves. I couldn't really see, insect parasites or other kinds of bugs sucking off the sap or whatever. But I think we can safely assume that this decline is caused by some kind of disease. And really looking forward to, or when I was doing this transplant, I was really looking forward to seeing the state of the root development. So for the root ball, you want it to be like completely root bound. Some people say that a plant being root bound is bad, but in my experience, it's often actually really good. Such as that ice cream bean you see that I had to transplant that way. So you can see one of the cut pots in the background on the left side of the screen. So I had to cut open those pots and then throw them away later. But yeah, the cylinders, well, it's not a perfect cylinder. It's more like a cone cylinder shape. Those are really tall compared to the width at the bottom. So the shape doesn't really match up because the square pot that I'm about to transplant this into, that I'll show you the inside of a new one later on, they have a limited depth, so I can't fully get it in there. That ice cream bean had it was completely root bound. The root ball was very, very robust, and I didn't want to cut it. I didn't want to use like an electric saw or anything like that. So that's how I ended up transplanting it. And it's done fine in the months since. So yeah, for this though, it's in a tiny pot. So this is like the perfect size to transplant into something much bigger. So I'm pulling this out, and I'm really dismayed at how there doesn't seem to be any root encirclement, meaning it's actually not root bound. So at that point, I was just like, well, it hasn't thrived in this tiny so-called 5-gallon pot cylindrical mass of a coco coir. Why not transplant it into one of these really big square pots with a built-in reservoir, like you see in the background for the lemon seedling. Or I'm not sure if I can even call that a sapling yet. But yeah, I figured I would transplant this and not water into, you basically surround the coco coir that it's in right here with a much bigger mass of fresh new coco coir, which would suck off all the water and help dry this out. And hopefully, if root rot is the problem, that could lead to a recovery of the root system and promote a lot of growth. So that was the thought process at this point. I've trimmed it to the point where it stands up. So this is a close-up, a demo of what these pots are like. There's a drainage hole. There's an internal chamber. So this is much like the self-watering pots that I bought to start this channel off about 10 years ago. And it's got holes underneath that connect to the reservoir. So even though the nutrients will probably mostly during rains, long rains, run off into the reservoir, the plant can still access that because it'll all soak up back into the mass of coco coir. So it's quite a big reservoir. These pots are pretty expensive. They're around $100. Well, everything's expensive now due to massive inflation. So these things are just really big, and they're not cheap to ship. I got them off Amazon. So you can see this is fresh coco coir. It's always fun to play with this stuff, hydrate it and break it up. It is a bit of work, but it's actually much less work and much less dirty. It's not as it's not a mess compared to all the other growing mediums, and it's not infested with parasites and all sorts of creepy crawlies like a potting mix normally is. So yeah, it's a pretty easy transplant process. I mean, you just try to get the plant centered, trying to get the stem, the main trunk centered, and adjust the angle to your pleasing so that it can stand on its own, and then pretty much just fill in the sides, pat everything down, and you're good to go. And I won't even be watering this. So yeah, I wanted to see, I think at this point I had maybe like 2 or 3 months at the most before the Mediterranean style climate of Southern California would kick in, and we'd enter the rainy winter season, or late fall. So around November, December, it would start raining. It'll usually start raining in Southern California, but the way it turned out in this case was it started raining, I think, just 1 to 2 months after this transplant. So, but if you think about it, I'm putting this into damp. You need to wet this stuff to hydrate it, to get it to expand. Then I kind of would let it dry out a little bit also. Also, you can see that big slab in the middle in the blue tub. It's not hydrated very well. It's sort of dry in the middle. So I purposely did this. I would just like kind of rub some coco coir off it. I didn't want something that was like super wet, because then it wouldn't be able to wick moisture away from probably the waterlogged root ball and coco coir mass that this plant was in. So the root system, I did transplants for all my other plants. The root system for this was very, very disappointing, and I'll cover the lemon as well. But I mean, I gotta be honest, like, I don't think this plant will make it in the long run. And it's really hard to see, now that I'm narrating over all this footage, why things went so bad from like the days, I don't know, was it like 450 to like 500? So it was like a 2-month period, and then all of a sudden things went really bad. Did the aphids introduce some kind of disease? Is that it? And so there's just some virus or fungal infection that killed everything. So yeah, at this point it's like, yeah, I've pruned at a lot of spots, and that's kind of jarring to the plant, but plants are tough. They should be able to recover. At least that was my thought, and it looks pretty good after this transplant. But will that hold up for the next few weeks or months? And within like about a month to 2 months after this, we started a rainy season. It rained a little bit more than in some of the past dry years, but we didn't really get much rain until, let's say, like 3 to 4 months after I did this transplant. So I'm narrating this as of the beginning of February in 2024, and the plant still had quite a while to go from when we received a ton of rain in January, and continue to receive a ton of rain in February. And it's very punctuated too, the rains this rainy season. It's like, I keep thinking we're gonna have like really, really dry overall, like a dry winter, but then all of a sudden Southern California will get like 4 inches of rain in certain places. So day 561, this thing just fell over again. So I'm going to have to say this is definitely not a seedling in origin. It's a cutting. So it looked like it could stand up, but as soon as I called its bluff and removed those stakes, those bamboo thin stakes, it just falls over like that. So I put 2 in the corners here and used some fresh nylon string to tie them like this. I tried a different kind of knot approach, just something I saw online where you loop it around the stick 5 times, and then you do like a kind of like a knot on after you do that. So that's supposed to be very structurally stable. Looks kind of aesthetic too, but I don't know what the knot is called, but it's held up ever since then, and I thought I would just have no problems. It looked like the new growth was going to continue. So it still looks pretty good here, but then we had a lot of really prolonged winter rains. It was cold, and I'm not sure if it's just like the cold or transplant shock or whatever, but this plant started to decline after that. And I originally wanted to wait and just include some more footage from 2024 and just make a finale episode, because I don't think it's going to make it. But this was towards the end of 2023, and it still looked like it was going to make it. It's just that, it was just, it took a very unexpected decline ever since, I don't know, it was like day 500 something. It was just, now that I'm reviewing all the footage in aggregate, I just have to chalk it up to disease and, well, pests too, because those are the vectors of the disease, the viruses and fungal infections, or maybe even bacteria. They don't just materialize out of nowhere. It's because bugs are biting the leaves and injecting like pathogens. So it's day 609. At this point, I got a new cell phone camera. So a new cell phone. And it's actually a very high-end smartphone. It's by Sony. So it's one of their Xperia line phones. Their marquee phones. So this has like a different sort of style to it, but it films in 120 frames per second at 4K, and it's more of a true video and photography style. It's what you have in the center is more in focus, instead of relying super heavily on just the processing power of modern smartphones to try to make everything surrounding it and in the background in focus as well. But yeah, the quality is still way better than what I had before, especially when you blow it up on a big TV or PC monitor. So yeah, that's the progress thus far. You can see there's still some new growth, but the stuff on the top, it's like covered in webbings. I don't know. I don't see like spider mites crawling everywhere, but I do see some little dots here and there. I do think maybe there are spider mites. I just saw an ant. I'd actually be happy if this whole thing was covered in ants drinking from the extra floral nectaries, because then, maybe they'd be protecting it somehow, but maybe the aphids were brought by the ants. They were farming it. So yeah, that looks pretty nasty. You can see all the webbing. Maybe that is spider mites. So despite my best intentions, I was spraying that Bayer Bio-Advanced. A lot of the pesticides that they sell in big box stores these days, they're not as potent as when I started this YouTube channel. And when I started this YouTube channel, spraying on my plants is far less potent than what came in the decades before. So oftentimes you'll spray, and just within a few days, it's like covered with bugs again. So anyway, that's the update. I'm sorry to say, I don't think this thing is going to make it, but I'm going to wait until early spring to make that final verdict to see if it resurrects. So thanks for watching this long update, and stay tuned for further updates.